Hey guys, so I am on. Let me double check to make sure the video is actually on. If you're on, drop a comment so I know things are going well. Okay, awesome. Well, so today's topics are not so fun. We're going to be talking about a small town that hired a debt collector to go after starving children. Because, there's a problem with children not being able to afford their school lunches. And so instead of trying to remedy poverty, we're going to send debt collectors after their families to further shame them. And this debt collector happens to be a lobbyist, so that'll be fun. And then I have a really good story out of the dollar store stuff that's going on. So dollar stores are basically systematically predatory because they go after poor communities that can't afford much and give them shit food and keep people in the cycle of poverty. But we have a small town out of Tulsa that is fighting back, and it's really nice. And then last but not least, we are going to talk about the 7-year-old who died at the U.S. border. Was murdered at the U.S. border. So here we go straight into it. Let me put you guys over to my desktop real quick. Excuse the trippiness. So town hires debt collector to get families to pay for school lunches. School officials in Cranston, Rhode Island are getting aggressive in seeking payment from parents for their kids' meals. Chief Operating Officer Raymond Votto Jr. sent a letter to all parents in the district informing them the district has hired Transworld Systems, a Delaware-based debt collector, to recover tens of thousands of dollars owed for school lunches. The school district, located in suburban Providence, Rhode Island, serves approximately 11,000 students in 24 schools. So, under the existing school lunch policy, parents are encouraged to prepay for lunches or to pay in cash on a daily basis. Children who didn't pay were given meals and asked to make reimbursement within 2 days. Households that qualify for reduced or free lunch programs were asked to apply for the program. Once a student has charged 5 meals, this is middle school, high school, and no payment has been received, that student will receive a lunch consisting of a sunny butter sandwich, fruit, and milk in place of a hot lunch. The meal meets USDA standards. But that's not like the real messed up part that I want to talk about. So obviously we shouldn't be shaming kids who can't afford their lunch, and then they're giving kids at least they're giving kids like bare minimum of food, which is, as we saw, the butter sandwich and fruit. I know in areas where I live, that's definitely not the case. The kid will starve if they don't qualify for programs and they don't repay their debts. But what's awful in this case is that this school district has hired a debt collector to go after these families. And this debt collector, Transworld, is a lobbyist in our U.S. Congress. So what does that mean? That means that this corporation pays a lobbyist to represent them in Congress. Pays a lobbyist and gives a lobbyist a stipend to bribe politicians in Congress. So I'm going to show you that on Open Secrets because, of course, the issue that they focus on is education, and, of course, the politicians that they mostly bribe are charter influenced politicians. So we're going to go back over here. So here's Transworld Systems. In 2015, they spent over $120,000 in lobbying U.S. Congress. In 2016, it went down to 70,000, and now in 2018, 10,000. So I know this seems really small, and it's like, oh yay, their lobbying has gone down. But here's the thing that we need to address. Some of these numbers, like the 2018 numbers, not all of them are in yet, right? 2018 isn't over. Once 2018 is over, all the politicians and lobbyists have their deadlines. So we'll get actual numbers probably in like February, March for all of 2018. But I wanted to show you this because it's not enough that we have poverty, so many kids not being able to eat, to pay for their lunches, but we also have to go after their families. It's like, what are we using our tax dollars for? It doesn't make sense. There's one more thing I wanted to show you. So hunger facts. No kid hungry. Because you need to see how bad it is in the United States. More than 13 million children in the U.S. live in food-insecure homes. 1 in 6 children in the United States face hunger. A common way we measure poverty is the federal poverty level, a number set by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The federal poverty level is the minimum amount of money a family needs each year to afford the necessities of life, food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. In 2016, the federal poverty level was $24,300 for a family of 4. Tragically, a huge number of Americans fall below this line. Over 40 million people, almost 13% of all Americans, lived in poverty in 2016. So, in 2016, the poverty level was $24,300, and 13% of the American families, 40 million people, were not able to make enough to even meet the poverty line standard. They were below poverty line. So if they can't even afford basic stuff at their homes, they're also going to be food insecure at school. It's not enough, again, that we have debt collectors going after these families for their rent, for their cars. Food is also not a right. Food, like being able to eat, is not like okay. So yeah, that's some numbers for you. And this isn't the first time I've heard about this, about a debt collector going into schools and, debt collecting from kids and their families. But this one is the first time that I've seen that the debt collector was actually a U.S. Congress lobbyist. That is terrifying, because it's terrifying because it means that this is their goal. How do these debt collectors make money? They make money by partnering with the district to collect, right? They make money by partnering with the state of education to collect. And where do these policies come from? It comes from the mayor, right? It can come from the state legislature, from the U.S. congressional reps that represent the state, that are getting lobbied by these lobbyists. Something important that you need to remember is that the trickle-down economy isn't a real thing, but trickle-down lobbyist donation is a real thing. I don't know if you guys caught this, but earlier this year I reported on Nancy Pelosi's donations. And so if you look at her donations on Open Secrets, she gets a lot of money from big pharma, from oil companies, health insurance companies, all the big industrial companies that profit off human suffering, basically. And then I reported where that money went in the primaries. In the primaries, there was a lot of money going from her donations to establishment primary opponents across the country. So that's how this lobbyist money works. You see what I'm saying? And that's why it's really scary that a debt collector corporation is collecting money from impoverished kids and their families who live below the poverty line, because they also have their fingers dipped in Congress. And it's just really important to know that. Like, it's just, people don't, like, well, first of all, people don't even talk about this, right? But even when they do talk about this, they don't see the bigger picture on how this is awful. So that's why I'm here telling you that this is not good. Alright, I'm going to go over to the chat to see what you guys are up to. Feed the students, eat the rich. Oh, why no connection? Well, the article doesn't have the connection. You would think, you know, and a publication called Think Progress would connect Transworld Systems to lobbying. But Think Progress, this publication is not as much of a progressive publication as it comes off to be. At some point, when Jordan starts talking about more in depth with his Flint publication story that he's been trying to get out, you will understand how difficult it is to get the truth out to mainstream media, even if the mainstream media is branded as Think Progress. It's some bullshit, to be honest. So real quick, I'm going to plug in our GoFundMe. Our GoFundMe is important, obviously. It's to get Jordan and Ty and them back in the field, and we need that. But also, more excitingly, which I'm very happy that this has finally happened, is Status Quo has an official membership option page. So it's cheap. So $1, $5 can get you extra content. And, you know, if you can't do that, that's okay. You can sign up to our email list and get, you know, news. Get the truth of what's going on, at least a shred of it. So, yes. And then after you do the email stuff, if you can't sign up for, like, to be a member, that's okay. Sharing our content helps out so much. Like, just to tell you how much it helps, Facebook purged 800 anti-war voices last month. So the social media oppression is really fucking real. Like, why are they purging anti-war voices when they should be purging out Nazis? Right? Like, why do the Klansmen get to have a voice? I will go to Facebook jail for saying men are trash, but a white supremacist won't go to Facebook jail for calling someone something racist. Okay. So I'm gonna go back over here. Doo-dah. Next up that I'd like to talk about is dollar stores. So here's the thing about dollar stores. Dollar stores service a particular class demographic. We were just talking about people below the poverty line. The poverty line, as of 2016, is 24,300 or below. And dollar stores cater to that demographic, people below the poverty line, to about 35,000. That's their target audience demographic. Since 2011, there has been a stupid increase of dollar stores and similar, like, Dollar Generals, things like that, right? So when I say dollar stores, I don't just mean the dollar store. I mean Dollar General. I mean all of those other ones. They actually, now hold on to your britches, this is crazy. They actually outnumber Whole Foods nationwide. There are more Dollar Generals across the United States than there are Whole Foods. Let's take a moment to break down what that means. That means there are more grocery stores that sell Coke, and frozen food items, then there are grocery stores that sell fresh produce and fresh meat. That's what that means. Grocery sales at dollar stores and Whole Foods. Dollar store, as of like 2018, has made over 24 billion of sales, while Whole Foods is a little over 12 billion. Now, I'm not trying to feel bad for Whole Foods. Amazon owns Whole Foods. Whole Foods is very elitist. That's a whole other rant in itself. But there are a lot of communities that only have dollar stores. They don't have any other grocery options. And that's not okay, right? So we're going to go more into this article because this one has a lot of good stuff. So Tulsa, Oklahoma. Before we dive into Tulsa, what's happening in Oklahoma right now, I need to remind you that Tulsa, Oklahoma was the epicenter of Black Wall Street. If you haven't heard of Black Wall Street, during like segregation years, a little bit after segregation years, there was Black Wall Street, and they were prosperous, they were owning their own stuff, and they were doing the best they can under the capitalism system that has been put in place since like forever ago. They were working it, they were doing their thing, and then they got massacred by white mobs. Completely bombed, completely destroyed, and there was no justice for the black people who died. No justice at all, and no compensation. To this day, the black families who owned a lot of wealth during the Black Wall Street period have not been compensated for their loss. As a matter of fact, after they were bombed and killed, this is like not even 40 years ago, maybe 50. It was not that long ago. That they've never been compensated. And after that, the white people came in and they put in policies to further oppress black people. And that community is still feeling that and facing that today. So I'm going to show you this chart over here because this story is about dollar stores and demographics in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Households with income below the poverty line. See, so we look over here, that dark green, 80% to 100% over here in this dark green area is people below the poverty line. Population identifying as black or African American alone or in combination. Here's the 80% to 100%. Oh wow, look, what a surprise. It's in the same place as the poverty line. See, look at that overlap. Wow. Now, there's some lighter shades of purple. But look, the lighter shades of purple still correlate with the lighter shades of green. Now, people tend to not believe me when I say this, but this is another example in how capitalism is rooted in white supremacy. We need to think about how our country was founded. How was our country founded? It was founded by murdering millions of indigenous people, first of all, okay? Second of all, it was founded by slave owners. The people who wrote up our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence owned people, okay? After that was done, and, you know, there was a whole civil war on the economy, which was, you know, slave trade, segregation happened. And there were specific capitalist policies that made it even harder for black people. Look at the housing market. There were actually like policies put in place where there were like, if your name was Lakeisha, you had a harder time getting a loan. There were red-lined neighborhoods. This is a real thing. And we see it here in continuation. So when I say capitalism is rooted in white supremacy, I'm not trying to be cool or blow smoke up your ass. Like, this is real. And those of us who are white passing and are white, we still benefit off this capitalist system. My name is Samantha. No one's going to question, like, I can get a job pretty easily. Whereas one of my friends, she's Indian, she's not black, but her name was Aburichi. And I told her she's going to have to shorten her name down to Abby and spell it the white way. White, not right, white. And I hate saying this, but I shit you not. When she shortened her name and made it white, she got a job the next day. So, anyway, that was a quick rant. We're going to go back to this dollar store stuff. Okay, so I'm going to take you back to the article because we're about to get to the good news part. In Tulsa, wow, I cannot speak today. In Oklahoma, there has been a group of people fighting back. And we're about to get to that good news. The absence of grocery stores in Tulsa is a direct result of a history of racial discrimination by banks that have been less likely to lend to African American entrepreneurs and by supermarket chains that have tended to bypass black neighborhoods. In the case of the Family Dollar, for example, food deserts are its sweet spot. The absence of grocery stores is, in turn, a direct result of a history of racial discrimination by banks that have been less likely to lend to African American entrepreneurs and by supermarket chains that have tended to bypass black neighborhoods. For residents of North Tulsa, the consequences of this economic marginalization has been severe. There has been a documented 14-year life expectancy gap between North Tulsa and South Tulsa. This startling disparity, she says, speaks to the situation and environment and how these systemic issues work. Last April, after more than a year of rallying community members, marshaling legal research, and steadily chipping away at opposition, Hall Harper convinced the City Council to enact a measure that limits dollar stores on Tulsa's north side and encourages the development of full-service grocery stores. This is the first ordinance in the country to specifically target dollar stores, and its passage is being felt both locally and nationally. It's marked a new era of political inclusion and grassroots power for the city's African American residents. It also focused national attention on the growth of dollar stores and inspired other cities and towns to take steps to check their spread. An invasive species. See, this is what I was talking about earlier, this chart right here about how many there are. So in 2009, we can see that the total amount of dollar stores is a little under 20,000, right? Now, here we are in 2018, and it's a little under 30,000. Look how much they have planned for next year. They want to go over 50,000 stores. Alongside urban black neighborhoods, another place the dollar chains think they will find enduring poverty is in rural America. Small towns have been battered by corporate consolidation. So yeah, there we are. I'm trying to find, here it is. So one immediate fact is the decline in employment. Dollar chains rely on a lean labor model. Dollar General and Dollar Tree stores have a staff of 8 or 9 people on average, according to their annual reports. Small independent grocery stores employ an average of 14 people, according to federal data. I wanted to point that bit out because a typical PR tactic, PR strategy that these corporations tend to use is that, oh, we're coming in and we're bringing in jobs. That's not necessarily the case, especially as we saw with the dollar stores. They have a lean model, which means they employ less than 10 people per dollar store. It's similar to the Aldi model. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the grocery store Aldi, but they employ like 3 or 4 people for one store. So that really, on top of hurting people by not giving them food, like having accessibility to produce and meat. They're also hurting the employment rate. Now back over here. Oops, I guess I should take you back over to the article. The jobs, tax dollars, and even any profits generated from a local grocery store go back to community, or at least to the owner who lives in or near that community. Significant profits from Dollar General are going back to their corporate office, not to their community. Here's another chart. Number of dollar stores per 10,000 residents by state. And I want to point out, like, you see all these dense ones that have a whole bunch of, that's like really, really densely populated with dollar stores. I don't think it's any coincidence that those are Republican states. Now, sorry Republicans, I'm about to take a shit on your party. But both parties are not for the working class people. They're just not. Republicans, even less. Look at the policies, look at the legislation. In Wisconsin, I don't know if you saw, but a Republican governor lost to a Democrat. And before this Republican governor is going to leave, he created policy to strip power from the next governor. Who does that? So it's those kinds of policies that I don't think, like, that's why I don't think the Republican Party has, like, the best interest with working class people, particularly, you know, black working class people or any other races. We also need to think historically, think about the Southern strategy. You know, the Southern strategy was specifically implemented to focus on states' rights, but states' rights is like doublespeak for local control, which in turn equals racism. That's what Jim Crow was all about. Jim Crow was local control. So, there's my little rant on that. So, what did this small town do? Or, well, Tulsa. Tulsa's not that small of a town. But they put in a new ordinance to boycott and put more focus on smaller grocery stores. Hall Harper rallied residents to protest the new Dollar General and pressure the mayor and city council to act. To my knowledge, this was probably one of the first times a city councilor from Tulsa was out actively organizing and coordinating protests of an incoming business. In late August, just a few days before Labor Day, the city council finally took up Hall Harper's proposed dollar store moratorium. Residents of North Tulsa filled the chambers and one by one spoke in favor of the measure. The show of support that Hall Harper says made all the difference. The moratorium passed by a 5-4 vote. It suspended the permitting of new small box discount stores for a period of 6 months. 3 months later, Hall Harper proposed a permanent change to the city's zoning code. She introduced a dispersal ordinance that would restrict the development of dollar stores, intended to foster greater diversity in retail options. Now, here is the best part. The new store will be operated by Honor Capital, a veteran-owned company that has a mission to bring healthy, fresh food to underserved communities. So far, Honor Capital, which is headquartered in Tulsa, has opened 10 grocery stores in a handful of states, including 3 in Oklahoma and 2 in neighboring Kansas. The stores are licensed under the Save-A-Lot brand, which initially gave Hall Harper a pause. We had another Save-A-Lot in Northeast Tulsa that was a poorly run store, but after touring one of the Honors Capital's licensed stores, she chartered a bus so neighborhood residents could join her. Honor Capital is backed by financing from the Reinvestment Fund, a community development financial institution that has been a leader in putting up capital for grocery stores in places that lack them. So me being me, I wanted to double check to make sure this good guy didn't have any backdoor bad stuff, and I didn't see them in open secrets. I kind of went through Oklahoma's like transparency stuff, because every state has like an ethics commission, and their ethics commission did not reflect, as far as I could see, did not reflect that they bribed the politicians through campaign money. So there's that. Let's go through a little bit more on this. This single victory is just the first step. One grocery store isn't enough. There is no shortage of ideas. How communities can check the growth of dollar stores. The dollar chains have been able to multiply virtually unimpeded because most communities have relatively lax planning and zoning policies. Even in Vermont, where big box retailers must navigate a thicket of environmental and land use policies, dollar stores, by virtue of being relatively small in size, rarely face permitting hurdles or scrutiny by planning boards. Some communities are beginning to correct this. In addition to limiting the density of dollar stores, as Tulsa did, another option for cities is to adopt a policy that restricts formula business, those that allow cookie cutter format. So that is the good news. So, right, there's a lot of ranting about dollar stores and systematic racism and food deserts because we have to have these talks before we understand why this victory, a small victory, was a victory for Tulsa, and how other communities can replicate it. I live in a suburb, right? I live in Houston. People tend to think Houston's just like downtown. Houston is an hour away from Houston. Truly. 2 hours if you're stuck in traffic. But I live in a suburb, and I can walk to my nearest grocery store. They have fresh food, fresh produce. There are some parts of town, like Sunnyside, that I visit, or Greenspoint, where they don't have fresh food walking distance. They have dollar stores, and that's not healthy food. So that's a victory, and hopefully that will help you guys out. Let's see. I'm going through the chat to see what's going on. Yes, yeah, Sam is 25. And yes, this is Kitchen Politics, brought to you from my kitchen. I don't know about you guys, but I like the blue. I like this. I like my sage. I just really vibe in my kitchen. So, alright, so the last story we're going to talk about, this one really pisses me off, is the little girl who died, well, basically murdered at our border. Everyone tends to think she's like Mexican, but she's not. She's from an indigenous community in Guatemala. And she was under U.S. border custody, and they didn't give her water. They did not give her any sustenance. She died of dehydration. So I'm going to show you a picture of her real quick, because I don't know if you guys know what she looks like. Excuse the trippiness. This is Jakelin, Amei, Rosmery, Maqui. She's a 7-year-old Guatemalan child that died in border control yesterday. Border control custody. So, over here, I have, here's another NBC. And though the government has argued that Jakelin's father was asked to sign forms attesting to their health, the forms are presented in English or Spanish. Jakelin's father speaks, I can't pronounce that, Quechua, I am so sorry, an indigenous language of the region. we need to remember that the wave of people coming into the United States are not just Mexican. They are indigenous communities from South America that the United States, has caused just total bullshit in. We have gone in there and we've backed the violence that's happening in their communities. And now they're fleeing their communities to try to find somewhere better. A lot of them, they don't have Wi-Fi, they don't have internet, they don't have any way of truly understanding of how shit the United States actually is. We just talked about income inequality with the dollar stores. Oh, I forgot to tell you, the rich, like the 1%, is forecasted to own 2/3 of the world's wealth by 2030. Just FYI. Hand in hand with the disappearing middle class. But they have no way of knowing that the United States is what's backing the violence down there. The United States, we've always been like the American dream. Well, it's since been PR and marketed to be something truly awful. It's no longer the American dream. But a lot of people who are fleeing US-backed violence, they just want to go somewhere safe. We have the Statue of Liberty still, and the Statue of Liberty means a lot to a lot of people outside the country. I don't think our Statue of Liberty should be up anymore. I think we should have, like, I don't know, a curtain over her or something. Because what we're doing, a lot of these people are seeking asylum. They're like, these people are crossing over illegally. No, they're trying to get asylum. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of the newest congressional reps, pointed out that instead of sending troops, we could have started sending out people to get these immigrants applied for asylum. We could have used our resources for that instead of, tear gassing them, instead of tear gassing children. So that's something I wanted to talk about because it's another thing that's underreported. The blatant dehumanization of this child who was not given water and was not given food would not have happened if she was white. Like, it just wouldn't have. Yes, I'm tearing up, sorry. But it wouldn't have. So here we are. Now, talking about indigenous people real quick. The last video I did talking about the indigenous win in the US, there were a lot of people who had questions about missing indigenous women and man camps. So I wanted to take a moment to further elaborate on that. So what are man camps? I'll go back to that. If there is a pipeline being built, if there is oil being pulled out of the earth, if there is, anything of that sort, construction-y type thing happening near a reservation, or in a reservations, because we all know the United States does not respect their treaties to indigenous people, construction workers camp out in that area in these things called man camps, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's camps full of men, and they go into the reservations and they steal indigenous women, they steal indigenous children, indigenous girls, usually teenagers, and a lot of them go missing all the time. There are so many indigenous women missing. It's like one of those silent emergencies Jordan talks about. It's awful. And no one talks about it. It's not enough that these reservations don't have clean water. But a lot of times they can't prosecute the rapist or, the injustice to the full of their ability, because the reservation, they have like their own sheriff stuff, right? They have their own thing that they do. But they're only allowed to prosecute up to a certain level. And then the United States government can't really get in because of the county and the reservation. So that's basically it's not enough to say, don't mine on our land, don't do this with our land. It's stuff like this that happens to women. They die, they raped, they get killed, they go missing all the time, way too often. Okay, well that's all I really have. I'm going to go back over to the chat to see what's going on. Alright, I'm reading through comments. Unfunded, Yes, dollar stores leech from the poor and city economy. They're really, really awful. Yeah, super chat. Finance, real estate, I didn't know this. Jurisdictions are rigged against indigenous people. They are. Jurisdictions are rigged against indigenous people. It's the same sort of thing that I was talking about earlier about redlining black communities, about how policies are specifically implemented to oppress black people. It's the same thing. I mean, well, it's a little bit different because it's according to race and the policies are a little bit different, but the common denominator is systematic oppression. That is the common denominator. So if anyone doesn't have any questions, I'm going to log off. The only thing I have left to say is become a member of Status Quo. If you can't, subscribe to our email list so you can get emails. And let's see. Oh, brief reminder. This is something that's been on my mind 24/7. If we do not get our shit together by 2030, there will be irreversible climate change. Just a reminder, I'm putting that back out there. I don't know if you guys talked about it, heard about that, but I just wanted to remind you that so you can call your reps, do whatever grassroots organizing you need to do. Because if we do not get our shit together by 2030, irreversible climate change. And I also want to remind you that 71% of our world's pollution comes from 100 companies. Okay, so I'm going to end with that. Y'all have a good night. I'm going to finish eating my pizza. Bye.